Us. What is the difference between a martial artist, UFC, MMA, and a fighter? All right, I probably answered this question maybe 10 times already, but it's always good to update. Sometimes people forget. You know, so what's the difference between a martial artist, say a fighter, and UFC, which a corporation, and MMA, right? Which is mixed martial arts. Now, I'm not here to insult anybody's martial arts style. I'm only here to motivate, inspire, right? Never to tear down a person, right? Or to be a troll or anything like that through the internet. So what's the difference between martial artists, UFC, MMA, and being a fighter? Because there are differences between all of those. So I'm going to try to break it down as best I can, in my opinion, through my journey that I've been through, from what I've learned. Because I've been doing martial arts for over, going by years, for 33 years now, and I'm still on my journey. So I'm going to start with a martial artist. What is a martial artist? Okay, in my opinion, martial arts is an art form, right? It's a way of expressing yourself in, say, for like a formation, kata, which is imaginary fighting, through forms. A lot of people compete with the martial arts, which I used to compete back in the days, right? At kickboxing tournaments, you can compete with weapons, forms, which is like musical katas. You can use your katas for demonstrations with weapons. You can do kickboxing, you can do point fighting. So there's various ways of expression, right? You don't have to be a fighter to be a martial artist. A martial artist is inside you. So you're basically challenging yourself. That's the whole thing. Martial arts is for self-defense. So there is no first attack with martial arts, only for defense only. Now it all depends on what you want out of the martial arts, right? A martial artist can be a fighter and compete. They have tournaments, they have corporations, organizations like UFC, which is a corporation, organization, right? But you compete in. So you would be competing in the UFC. UFC is not martial arts by itself. The person is martial arts. You see what I'm saying? So the person is competing in UFC, in MMA. MMA is mixed martial arts. So martial arts means empty hand fighting. You come to your opponent or to your attacker with only empty hands. Having weapons is an extension of the hands, right? Martial arts is for discipline, really confidence, right? Respect, honor in martial arts. Martial arts is also what you put into your body, which I learned later on in life. So the foods that you put into your body is very important, because if you don't fuel your body right, your martial arts will not exist, because your body won't be able to perform, right? Same thing with drugs, alcohol, which I learned, through my journey, because I was going towards that path of alcohol, as well as prescription medication, drugs, pharmaceutical drugs. So I was going towards that path, and I had to make a lifestyle change, get back to my martial arts, which took me a little while, took me a couple of years to get back to myself. I started out with martial arts as a teenager, and then I lost it along the way. So martial arts is something that you can lose if you don't continue training. A martial artist train consistent basis. Doesn't train for competition. As I said, you're challenging yourself, mind, body, and spirit, right? Martial arts is not about going out there and kicking people in the head, punching them in the face for self-defense, right? If you want to compete with your martial arts, that's fine. It all depends on what you want out of your martial arts. So that's a martial artist to me. It's an art form. It's a way of life. And all these things I learned through my journey. And if I didn't experience what I experienced, I wouldn't know this right now to be talking about it, right? I competed in tournaments, won trophies, won medals, won plaques. But, all those things, it was good at the time. Competition is good. As I said, it all depends on what you want out of it. But all those things don't mean anything at the end of the day, you know, because all those things can be erased. You know what I'm saying? But the knowledge that I have now, you can't take that away from me. You see, it's inside me. So it's my daily practice, my training, and I don't train for anything. I'm not training to be one of the best, not training to win trophies, to be UFC champion. I'm not training for none of that. I'm training for myself. You see what I'm saying? Challenging myself daily. That's a martial artist to me. And also for self-defense, as I mentioned, which martial arts, self-defense first only. There's no attack in martial arts. So that's martial arts to me. That's a martial artist to me. Now on to UFC, MMA. UFC, MMA. UFC is an organization. It's a corporation. UFC by itself, it's not martial arts. The person that participates in kickboxing, Glory, UFC, Bellator, is the martial artist, right? All on the person. The organization stands by itself. It's a corporation. It's a money-making thing. It's entertainment, right? There are rules in the sports. There are regulations. There's weighing. There are referees. There are judges. Once you have that, it becomes a game. It's no more, say, realistic thing, or you're using it for self-defense. It's not that anymore. It's all for money. It's a sport now, entertainment. You have rounds, you have time limits. It's different than now. There are certain techniques you cannot use, and once you limit your techniques, they're taken away from the martial arts itself, right? Now, when I mentioned that there's martial artists that compete, there's a handful of people in UFC that I consider to be martial artists, in my opinion, right? Meaning that they train, on a daily basis, regardless if they're gonna compete. They have a foundation of martial arts training where they probably train for years. They didn't just pick up some kicks, pick up some punches, and then call themselves a martial artist. There is wrestling, there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there is Greco-Roman wrestling, there are NCAA Division I wrestlers that come in, which, do I consider them to be martial artists? As I mentioned, to be a wrestler takes a lot of training. You see how dedicated wrestlers are. I've wrestled myself, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I know, what it takes to be a wrestler, and it's a lot of work, right? But you remember when UFC just came out, the sport, in the beginning, wrestlers, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was dominating the striking, because in the beginning, martial artists, Kung Fu, Karate, Taekwondo, didn't implement any ground techniques. They knew nothing about the ground. So whenever the wrestler, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, closed the distance, he would take them down and they wouldn't know what to do on the ground. But now the game has changed, and you have a karate guy, taekwondo guy that adapted the wrestling, adapted the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and added to his game, which you can say is mixed martial arts. You see what I'm saying? And they're able to defend, sprawl, stay on the foot, and use distance and range, and execute their techniques. So what I'm trying to explain to you, that the base of martial arts starts standing up. That's your base. Your foundation is stand up. The ground is secondary. Now, if you were walking on hands and knees, like crawling, then you could say the ground comes first. But you walk straight up. You walk standing up. You're not crawling. So the stand up is the first thing you need to perfect. Movement, distance in range. That's the important thing. Once you grasp the concept of movement, distance in footwork, learning how to switch stance, set up your techniques on the outside, then everything else will flow after that. But if you're lacking the stand-up now, and you're trying to rely on wrestling alone or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with no stand-up, you're going to have a problem. Now it all depends on who you're fighting now. All depends on the martial artist you're fighting. You see what I'm saying? Because not everybody is the same. It's not because you do karate, that doesn't mean that you're going to be the best karate guy in the world, because it all depends on the person. So if you haven't trained your karate, train your kung fu on a consistent basis, took it seriously, perfect your form, your movement, your distancing, your range, and understand the ground game properly enough to defend, get back to your foot. If you go up against, say, a wrestler or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, and they have perfected their techniques to where they understand it enough to use it against you, say in a real fight, street fight, or in a sport game in the cage, then the striker gonna have a problem. See, it's just common sense. It's all on the person. It's all on the person. Yeah, you learn the techniques, but it's up to the person to train those techniques. You know, they gotta know how to implement it in a real life situation. Or if you're playing the game, you have to know how to move around in the cage. And as I mentioned, it's a sport. Rules, regulation, referees, judges, and you're fighting in a cage. It's a difference when you're fighting in a cage. You have to know the cage. Because if you don't know the cage enough, even though you know how to strike, you know how to kick and punch, if you've never been in the cage, if you go up against a wrestler or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, he's going to run you back to the cage. And once your back touch that cage, he's going to take you down because he understands the cage. So it's all in knowing your environment also, as I mentioned, in a sport, a game. And that's the difference. And as I said, there are like a handful of people who are considered to be a martial artist. There is conditioning, which is very important. Athleticism. What I mean by that is you condition your body through cross training, jogging, lifting weights, jump rope, swimming. You know, you do different variety of exercises, build up your cardio. That plays a big factor, because if you can't breathe, you can't fight. If your body can't last in certain situations, you're not gonna last in a fight, real fight, or in a sport. So that plays a big factor. What you put into your body, the food you're eating, is the number one thing, as I mentioned before. So I'm not putting down any MMA fighter, UFC, or whatever, because I make prediction videos on them. You know, and as I said, I want to see like a handful of people who I consider to be martial artists. You know, and I do prediction videos on them. Maybe sometimes I might get the predictions wrong, but I break down a video on what each opponent need to do to win the fight. It's up to them to come true. As I said, the person. Prediction is a game, gambling, betting, basically. You're just picking whoever you feel is going to win the fight. You know, that doesn't make me a less of a martial artist if I don't get it wrong. All right, you see what I'm saying? So you have to understand that there's a difference between a martial artist and UFC, which is a corporation organization that put on fights. A fighter, no, is somebody that will fight anywhere, anytime. Don't really need any technique, really no skill, but they can swing those hands, and if it catches your face, you get knocked out. Right? They can go in there and brawl and put it down. As I said, in UFC, you got fighters, you got martial artists, right?